The story in Tears of the Kingdom is underwhelming. It's not terrible, it doesn't ruin the game, and it's not as if it doesn't improve on the story of the game that came before. It's just kind of unimpressive. Is that a controversial take? Is it rude to say that the direct narrative is predictably mediocre? Don't get me wrong, the game is full of great potential for storytelling. I mean, the world is rich in history and implication. The NPCs express such a vast range of unique personalities, and the emergent storytelling that comes from player interaction, it really can't be beat. But then you get to the cutscenes and hey, they're well choreographed, they're animated with precision and expertise, and they communicate these big moments really well. The immensity of the more dramatic, more action-packed sequences is remarkable, but, some of them are just kind of boring. They feel like a formality, something that had to go in the game, but there's not much to them to make them really stand out. And so, a lot of players come to a cutscene, sigh to themselves, and wonder if it's worth just pressing the skip button so they can get back to building a giant penis machine. And that's kind of a shame. Telling an impactful story in a AAA video game is not an easy feat, and I do not envy the people tasked with attempting to make the plot of Ganon trying to take over the world for the 40th time seem innovative or new. With a mass-market product like Tears of the Kingdom, the sheer scope of their audience means that no matter what they do, they will not satisfy everyone. Not to mention, they're dealing with budgets, deadlines, bureaucratic miscommunications, company mandates, and all kinds of dark forces that seek to dismantle human creativity, afraid that if it was left unchecked it would slow the drip feed of human blood that fills the golden chalice atop the hoard of the Dragon King, who, we have all agreed, is an emblem of achievement, hard work, and natural talent. And hey, maybe I'll be a dragon someday too, so better keep on filling that chalice with blood. Oh, where was I? I like Tears of the Kingdom. I like the story just fine, but yeah, it's just fine. So I'm approaching this video as a creative writing project. If given the chance, what would I want to change about the story that might make it a little punchier, a little more effective? Thinking about it, there are three main points that I think could have been handled better. Point 1. The Sage cutscenes. Speaking of appreciating the hard work industry writers do and how often they're forced into no-win scenarios, the cutscenes with the ancient sages are bad and dumb. They suck ass. Let me explain. At the end of each temple, you fight a boss. It's big and dramatic, it has all this building momentum, and then after you beat it, you come face to face with an ancient sage who passes on their secret Zonai stone to your companion and tells you the story of the imprisoning war. Each of the 4 sages who do this tell you the exact same story. It is borderline copy-pasted. The first time you see it, hey, that's something. The second time, wait a second, are these all gonna be the same? The third time, I can't believe these are all exactly the same. The fourth time, so what the fuck was the point of any of this? I mean, obviously, the final battle of the imprisoning war is an important moment in the plot of the game, but it's not super compelling. It's such a standard scene. Oh, we fought the bad man, but we couldn't beat him, so the boss sacrificed himself. What a cool guy. Later I was told to do this exact thing that I'm doing right now, and I agreed, and here we are. Oh man, so many twists and turns, such drama. Can I see that again? One more time? Oh, once more, please. So how do we fix this? Well, call me old-fashioned, but I feel like the sages should ideally have personalities. They decided that the sages shouldn't have those. Not only are all the performances very understated and the dialogue is flat and emotionless, you don't even get to see their facial expressions, and that's part of the design. Even if we only interact with them for one scene, shouldn't we have some idea of what kind of people these sages were? Then their personality would reflect the way they choose to tell the story. Even if we're not learning new facts about the event, we're at least learning about the character telling it to us. It's not much, but it would be something. It would be anything, which is more than we have now. Hell, if you're telling the same story 4 times, just make it a Rashomon. Each sage remembers it a little bit differently. You have to piece together the inconsistencies in order to suss out the actual events. And then later on, when Mineru gives the whole broad overview in a later cutscene, those inconsistencies are sorted out and we finally get the whole story. Now, the audience is engaging with the narrative presented to them. Wow! I mean, one of the sages is a Gerudo. Are you telling me the Gerudo sage has no meaningfully distinct perspective on this conflict that would radically change the way they choose to tell the story, as opposed to how the Goron or the Rito would tell it? These sages are also the only representatives we have from the ancient peoples of Hyrule. I mean, if you don't want to single them out as distinct characters, at least let them function as a metaphor for the attitudes of their communities. The Rito were slow to answer the call to rise up against Ganon, and so the Rito sage feels especially guilty for not being there sooner. The Gorons were eager to show off their strength in the fight, but the Goron sage had to be humbled by Ganondorf's resilience and power. And the Zoras are fish, so they were just flopping around. I mean, it doesn't have to be that exactly, but you know, I'm just spitballing. As it stands, these scenes are kind of a drag. I don't think they had to be, even with the expectation that they all cover the same event in a way that doesn't require doing the temples in a specific order to understand the story. Just let the sages be, just let them be a little stinky. Let them get their stink all over their cutscenes. It's better than nothing. It's better than nothing. Point 2. Ganondorf. The big pig himself. Ganondorf was pretty heavily featured in the marketing for the game. I mean, this is the first time we've seen him since Twilight Princess. So, what is Ganondorf all about in this story? Well, in the original translation, they attempt to explore his desire for imperial rulership by introducing his philosophy, which is rooted in these two distinct values. The first value is power. Duh, that's his thing. Might makes right, big dog gets the big bone. This is all familiar territory, but the second value is courage. That's interesting. The piece of the Triforce associated with Link, the hero. In Ganondorf's worldview in the original translation, to embrace courage is to reject peace. Peace is the refuge of the cowardly, of the small. No bait, he wants a world of perpetual struggle. He wants dissidents rising up to challenge him. He wants conflict to go on forever. He wants the war on terror, but in real life. Can you even imagine it? But because he has such faith in his own power, such a world would pose no threat to him. He would always assert his rule. He would always reign victorious over his opposition because he believes he is beyond reproach. He never loses. This is kind of a great way to interpret a character who has for so long just been portrayed as the bad guy doing bad guy things. I mean, it's morally repugnant, but in a way that is recognizably human. Now, I'm drawing this characterization out from the original translation. The in-game dialogue plants the seed of this idea, but it only has so much time to do that. I mean, in the English translation, they didn't even bother to plant any seeds. He's just the bad guy doing bad guy things. Oh, that dirty light, if only it was all dark like I wanted. Oh, you rapscallions are too little to fight me. Go on, try, I'll myrtleize you. I mean, I mostly listen to the Spanish translation, so I might be a little off in my impersonation. Highly recommended, by the way, much punchier. Regardless, whether the game actually allows Ganondorf to have depth or not, a problem arises from the fact that he's only in like 5 cutscenes. We just don't get much time for him to say anything interesting. I want to like Ganondorf's characterization. I want there to be a game that gives him a real motivation again, so people can stop leaning exclusively on 3 lines from Wind Waker. He coveted those wins, don't you understand? He wants stuff. That's something, as opposed to, once again, nothing. So how do we do this? We can't just start adding more cutscenes to give Ganondorf more time to say how being strong is cool and how being weak is cringe. So I had a thought. You know the Gloom Hands? It's this great little enemy encounter design, super unsettling, panic-inducing, it's good stuff. When you finally dazzle fruit them to death, a Phantom Ganon appears, and if you beat him, he gives you his Dark Clump and a sword that eats your blood. The model for Phantom Ganon is great. Let's use that. What if, scattered in discrete locations around this massive world map, there were Phantom Ganons, standing silently as they stare off into the distance? There's no mission attached to this, there are no quest markers. It's just a thing you can find out in the open world. You approach them and you try to fight, but your attacks don't land. They're just a regular NPC. You can talk to them. These Phantom Ganons are an extension of Ganondorf, as he uses his own Shrine of Resurrection to get all nice and chunky again. When you talk to them, the Phantom Ganon speaks with Ganondorf's voice, and he tells you what's on his mind. Maybe it's a story from an age long past, when the mountains were different, when the shorelines were further out. Maybe it's an observation about the people he sees, the cultures he sees populating the world that he never thought were possible. Maybe he's just thinking about his eventual rise, and what it will mean for the people of this pathetic, quiet world. Then after he monologues to you about how everyone is super lame except for him, he fights you, and you beat him, and it's all good. No new assets need to be made, just a few short scenes with some new dialogue. Also, I think the reveal of Phantom Ganon appearing after defeating the Gloomhands is just such a good, emergent moment. I mean, the first time it happened to me, I was just freaking out at how ridiculous it was. It was so mean. I wouldn't want to take away from that experience. So how about these narrative Phantom Ganons don't appear until you've defeated at least one of them? The main story already involves you taking some down, so even players who never run into a Gloomhand patch in the wild would still be able to encounter these scenes after they raid Hyrule Castle. I mean, doesn't that just sound fun? Doesn't that sound like a fun way to keep the main villain more present in the story without him just showing up to cause trouble? It's just this quiet, tense moment on a mountaintop with a reflection of the Demon King bearing down on a world he seeks to conquer. It lets the writers explore Ganon's character with more intricacy while still following the structure of keeping the story entirely optional for players who choose to engage with it. Point 3. Mineru. This is my last point. But why? Why bother talking about Mineru? Well, the last scene of the game features Mineru going off to the Golden Land with Rauru and Sonia. Zelda's so sad that she'll never see her dear friend again, and I just gotta ask, What does the game expect me to be feeling during this scene? Am I genuinely supposed to care? Do they want me to be welling up with emotion for Mineru? They have done nothing to make this character connect with the player. I mean, to be fair, she does become the spirit inhabiting the very slow, very unwieldy, completely useless robot. I mean, it's great for farming Zonite. If I was super into that robot, maybe this scene would have been like 2% more effective, and I'm sure there are people who were genuinely, appropriately invested in this scene, but it doesn't feel like the game's done anything to warrant this kind of emotional catharsis to be attached to Mineru passing on to the next realm. Mineru is exposition goat. She explains how things work, she sets up some foreshadowing, and she clarifies some lore. Great, that's fine, you need a character for that. This is a fantasy world with fantasy doodads. Someone's gotta tell you what they do. Here's the thing, if she is exposition goat, she is not deep bond goat. She is function over form goat. She's not the goat. She's just a goat. At what point in developing the story did they decide that Mineru passing on was going to be a part of the final scene of the game? Once they made that choice, they really should have done something to get us to care. But most of her story is relegated to the flashbacks, and she's only in a couple scenes, so let's change that. Let's get a little more intrusive with this creative writing project. So the tier cutscenes, let's zhuzh them up a little bit. The first two we don't need to worry about, they're good. They show Zelda appearing in the past, meeting Sonia and Rauru, and getting an idea of what's going on. A nice detail that hints at a deeper characterization is this silent little interaction between Sonia and Rauru. You get a sense of their relationship from how they gesture toward each other, allowing players to fill in the gaps and project out this greater grasp of their dynamic. Sonia has a sort of immediate intuition for what needs to be done, and Rauru respects that implicitly. It's not much, but it's something. It's indicative of the characters existing outside of their necessary placement in the plot. Then we get the scene where Mineru explains secret stones and magic powers to Zelda, and this just sucks. This scene is boring. It's slow and plotting. I get it, you need to exposit stuff, but that's all the scene is. Here's what this stone does, here's what that stone does. Draconification is a thing, it works like this. I mean, it's not like the interaction isn't believable. It's just completely dull, and it makes our first impression of this character completely neutral to bordering on negative. So how do we spice this up? Well, here's a question. What is the dynamic between Mineru and Rauru? They are, as far as we know, the last two members of the Zonai people. They are brother and sister. They possess very different powers through their secret stones. Rauru's is light, the power to destroy darkness. Mineru's is spirit, the ability to detach your spirit from your physical body. Immediately, there's a contrast between these powers that could easily reflect on the characters' personalities. Rauru is bullheaded, always jumping into action. He's got a bit of a savior complex. He has the power to defeat the forces of darkness, and by Jove, he's gonna use it. Mineru is detached. She can literally leave her own body in order to navigate the realm of the spirit. We see her in a more academic setting, doing research, performing experiments, all important work, but much less brazen, less direct than her brother. So here's an idea. Instead of them all just blathering exposition at each other in this scene, let's actually make a scene out of it. Zelda and Rauru come upon Mineru's body, motionless in a meditative pose. Above her, her blue spirit is hovering, surrounded by odd geometry and unreadable letters. Rauru calls out to her jokingly, "Mineru, come back to us, Mineru." He taps her on the shoulder, causing her spirit to jerk back into her body, waking her up just in time to bop him on the nose. "What do you think you're doing?" she snaps at him. "Oh, I just wanted to see if you could find it in your heart to join us back here in the real world," he responds. "I'll join you when I'm good and ready," she barks back when she notices the Hylian woman standing behind him. Mineru softens and introduces herself to Zelda. When Zelda introduces herself and attempts to explain that she's from the future, Mineru's just immediately on board. She gets it. We get the necessary details about the stones, but we can cut Zelda having time and light powers. We just saw that in the previous scene. Rauru pushes his sister on this idea of traveling to the future, and Mineru just sort of shrugs the question off, half-heartedly responding, "Well, you know, there's always draconification." Zelda's curious, but Rauru immediately dismisses the idea, offended that his sister would even bring it up. When Zelda presses the issue, Mineru explains how the process works. She can barely finish her description when Rauru stands between the two of them, asserting that it is forbidden for a reason, bemoaning what is to him a blasphemous idea. The idea of giving up your spirit, your identity, your agency to change the world around you, to become this completely non-partisan dragon. Mineru, sick of hearing her brother give the same old speech, ultimately agrees that draconification isn't really a feasible option, and the group decide that training Zelda's time powers with Sonia is going to be her best bet. Now this would make for a longer scene, but since these sequences are all completely optional for the players to engage with, I don't think adding an extra minute is really much of a problem. This isn't that much different from the original scene, but now instead of blank exposition robots, we have perspectives being raised and challenged, interactions that reflect a deeper history, and a reason to see Mineru as a character worth getting attached to, rather than just just a prop for narrative progression to pivot around. But we're not done. We're here to make players care when Mineru passes on. So the next scene is where the Moldugas attack. We don't need to make any big changes. Maybe throw in a line though. Zelda asks, hey, where's Mineru? This is important. And Rauru grumbles that she's stuck in her lab, oblivious to what's really happening, what's really important. Now we start to see some of the barbs between the two of them. For all of Mineru's expertise, she doesn't apply it to preserve the kingdom. Rauru feels like she's blowing off everything that he cares about. They're living in two different worlds, despite being the last of their kind. Then the next scene, Ganondorf's taking a knee. Maybe we just include some of the Japanese dialogue. Give him some kind of motivation. But also, we could have Mineru just be there, sitting to the side, hardly paying attention to the proceedings. After Ganondorf leaves and they're discussing how clearly the guy's evil, but they gotta be diplomatic, have Mineru challenge that. She doesn't see why her brother would accept that kind of clear antagonism sitting down, and Rauru defends his choice as politically necessary. We don't need them to go into theory or anything, you just, give them something to talk about, something to discuss. It starts to get heated between them when Sonia speaks up and reminds them that they're all family, they're all on the same side. Again, just add an extra bit to the end where the characters have a little more room to express themselves. I don't think there's really anything wrong with the original version of this scene, but this is Mineru world now. Let's make something out of it. The next scene is everybody hanging out in that little garden gazebo. While we're here, I don't like this scene either. Oh, what's on your mind, Zelda? Oh, you're so noble. You wanna help us even though you need to get back to the future. Oh, that's so noble, Zelda. You're so noble. No, we're not having that conversation. That's boring. Mineru's here now. She's meditating while Zelda and Sonia are practicing their time stuff. We can keep the line where Sonia explains how you pull an object's memory out, you coax it along, since that plays into how Zelda returns the Master Sword to power, all that. But let them talk about some other stuff. Maybe they start talking about this idea of sacrifice. That's kind of a major theme for all of these characters. Zelda can even mention how she's already sacrificed so much to keep Ganon at bay the first time around. Also, we don't need her to explain who Link is to Rauru in this scene. These people have known each other for a while. They've talked about stuff. It's more fun for Rauru to just casually bring his name up in regards to what Zelda has waiting for her back in her time. Use that to tease her a little bit. Rauru jolts Mineru out of her trance with that same line, come back to us, Mineru. She's grumpy about it, but they're all just hanging out. They're just chilling. And maybe Sonia says something that's weirdly morbid. A truth about the nature of life and sacrifice, what it means to give yourself over to something greater than you will ever be. What are we but borrowed time and fleeting potential? It's the kind of thing that seems vaguely positive, but it's a little unsettling. Sonia has a sort of command over the people around her. They just naturally gravitate to the things she says. It makes them think. The scene ends with some gentle shenanigans. Mineru throws a pastry at Rauru. They all get in on the brawl. Even Sonia joins in. They're a family. Nothing will tear them apart. Then, of course, we get the scenes where Ganondorf smites the shit out of Sonia. We're just trying to make these emotional scenes hit a little bit harder, okay? Lion King perfected the formula. Before the person dies, show them not only being a good person, show them having fun with their family, show them being human, rolling around with their son in the grass, or throwing Kirsch at their goat sister. Then kill them. Make people feel bad. Isn't that the point? Sonia was the glue holding this family together, and now that she's gone, the tension between Rauru and Mineru goes from manageable spats to angry, vulnerable fights. Both of them blame themselves for Sonia dying, and neither of them is willing to talk about it. Zelda tries to be that glue that Sonia was, but she can't quite match that energy. You can have the scene where they bring the sages into the magic stone room, but, include some tension between the two Zonai. Then in the next scene where Zelda tells Rauru they'll never succeed, they're talking about this idea that he's gonna survive for generations, and then Mineru chimes in. Standing at the edge of the room, calmer than we've seen her in the last couple scenes, she says that even if they can't defeat him yet, they can still do some good by stopping him now. She's adopted a bit of Rauru's straightforward do-good attitude. And on that same note, Rauru reflects on the challenge of detaching himself from an inevitable failure in order to consider the possibility of a potential success in the distant future. They've learned from each other, and the three of them join hands and agree to stand united. They're all on the same side, they're all family. And now, it feels like Mineru is actually integral to the story. It feels like she stands for something. And in that final scene, she looks up and says, I think I hear my brother calling. He's asking if I'm finally ready to join him. And I am. And then she disappears and everyone's like, oh man, you said the thing you said before. That's called mise en scène. Oh, it's not? Oh, whatever. I'm not going to pretend that I've written a remarkable story here off the backbone of what's already in the game. I just think with a few little tricks and techniques, the emotional resonance the story is trying to evoke could be realized. Are there other things the game could do better story-wise? Sure, but these are just 3 things that stuck out to me while I was playing. Hey, thanks for watching the video. I've got one more Zelda video in mind, talking about what I'd like to see from the series going forward, but feel free to leave your thoughts, questions, and accusations in the comments below. We are all borrowed time and fleeting potential, so let's get out there and dance.